It's really great to be with you today. We've gotten a fair number of opportunities to present to you over the last 18 months, and we really enjoy doing it. So this is, as Lori said, the second of a three-part series we're doing on recruiting, relating, and retaining great employees. And so this one is Relate, Keeping Great Employees Engaged. And my hope is that you get a fair amount out of this today. My hope is that we can engage a little bit together during the process. And so as Lori said, if you get a chance to download those handouts, particularly the My Notes and Action items, I encourage you to do that as we're going to take a couple of pause and reflect moments together. And where you put your answers or your questions or any feedback we asked for, if you could do that in the questions area, I believe. Lori can help us facilitate that as we go. So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are just for a minute. I'm going to cover the topic, and then we'll have hopefully some time for Q&A at the end. This one is pretty full. I'm going to do my best and may have to sort of slice or cut a few things down to make sure we hit our hard stop at 2. So just a little bit about our firm. Again, I'm Erin Koss, founder and CEO of Site Consulting Group. We've been in business about 25 years. Our mission in the world, if you will, and with our clients is to invest in individuals and organizations in a way that results in quantum leaps forward and lasting impact. So we're really about helping companies grow and scale their growth is what we're about. On our team, what you're going to find is a whole pile of experienced folks ranging from anywhere from 15 to 25-year veterans in these areas that are listed here. So strategic planning. We have a fair amount of industry expertise in the food and beverage, biotech, manufacturing is a sweet spot for us as well, and business process improvement, project management, technology, and organizational design, development, and change. So we cover a pretty wide range of topics as we focus on enterprise solutions from a strategic perspective, helping companies select, implement, and optimize. We are not a VAR. We work on the client side, so we like to say we're an extension of our client team as they try and bring about important, deliver on important change initiatives that are really pivotal to helping them grow at scale. So we try to help them eliminate the guesswork, because this isn't where most companies spend a lot of time, particularly in the selection space, and then the implementation space as well. Usually saves them time and money to do that. And then our goal and what's really important to us in the process is we're helping them to align their company culture, people, processes, and technologies with these business objectives. And ERP tends to be a big lever, as many of you are probably aware if you've done your NAV implementation, that they take a fair amount of time and effort, and it's not something you do every day. And so we try and lean in and add our experience to that from a strategic perspective. And then lastly, the things that we value most on our team, we like to say we value being good teammates. That's within our own organization as well as with our clients. We're committed to doing the right thing. We're dedicated to excellence. We believe in candid and kind communication. And finally, living a balanced work and personal life. So tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, and this will be something that if you could throw it into the question section, we'll take a peek at this a little bit, but it'd be really fun to know, just for feedback as we go along, if you're willing to share your company name and maybe your role or any part of these 4 areas. How many employees? More than 25, less than 25? This is important information when we're talking about HR topics like we are today. And then finally, what brings you here? What are you hoping to get out of today? So instead of, I think, getting this information from everyone, because it does take a minute to gather this information, I really encourage you to throw this in the Q&A section, and I'll kind of take a peek at it as we go along, and it'll give me a sense of who we have with us, and maybe even call on you if I get an opportunity. That would be great. I would appreciate that. So last month, we talked about recruiting, how to hire the best people for your organization, and we discussed how to attract, identify, and welcome talent into our organizations. Today, we're going to talk about how to relate to our valuable people now that we've both made the commitment to work together. We will address several key questions about employee engagement. What is employee engagement? Why is it important? What does it look like? Why do employees become disengaged from work, and what are some things we can do about it? How leaders, particularly in an organization, can relate to and engage their employees more effectively. And then, similar to our discussion on recruitment, we have several opportunities to pause and reflect, I hope, today, again, with a little less time than usual, If I refer you back to the handouts Lori mentioned, where particularly that notes and action items page, we're going to take a pause and give you an opportunity to fill some of that out as we go. Because the goal is that you get back to your organization and you have some actionable next steps that you can just take action on quickly. So let's begin by laying the foundation with some definitions. What do we mean by engagement? It's a bit of a buzzword these days. And how is engagement different from satisfaction? So we talk about employee engagement as being the extent to which employees feel passionate about their job, are committed to the organization, and put discretionary effort into their work, versus employee satisfaction, which is more about how happy or content your employees are. So you can see there's similarities to the concept, but they're not necessarily the same. So someone can be happy and not engaged, or they might be engaged and not particularly satisfied with their job. Organizations who seek strong relationships and high levels of retention with their people strive for both. And so this is going to be our focus today. And why is this important? It might go without saying, but I'm just going to kind of make sure we're all on the same page here. And that is that, at the end of the day, humans are built for and desire connection with one another. And this is true in our personal lives as well as in our professional lives. In fact, I had one client share with me recently. It was really interesting. One of her employees, they were working on their core values, and one of her employees came in and said, I don't remember quite how she said it, but the gist was, we are messy, happy, sad, run the gamut of emotions, human beings outside of work. I don't necessarily lose that human when I come into work. So what she was saying is she was expressing at some level her desire to be bring her whole person to work. And so I think part of what we're talking about under the hood of this concept of engagement is, how do we allow our whole person to show up at work? How do we allow that for our people? I think the more we can do that, the more connected folks are going to feel to our organization, which drives us to work harder, stay later, give our absolute best. It's a win-win, right? So connection isn't necessarily about getting compensated more, though we'll talk about that later. The connection brings about all these other sort of personal benefits. People feel more valued, they feel more cared for, and they work harder. They're more productive because they're more engaged. So again, engagement and satisfaction, that's what we're going for. Interestingly enough, a recent Gallup poll indicated that employee engagement in the U.S. was around 31.1%. So take a minute and think about that. This is a little disturbing because it means that really only 1 in every 3 employees feels engaged at work. And employee engagement can impact many areas within the organization. So today, as we go through these different areas of when we talk about engagement and what causes disengagement, I really encourage you to think about which of the things we talk about impact your organization specifically. Circle them, highlight them, but really it'll help you to prioritize the things you focus on when you get back to your own organization. So things like retention, these is where we see the most impact. Customer service, participation in the strategic vision, absenteeism, motivation, productivity, and communication. As you consider these areas, I want to share a couple statistics with you. One is that businesses with more engaged employees tend to have 51% higher productivity. Like, what would that look like in your organization if you had 51% higher productivity? Companies with the most effective employee communication have 47% higher shareholder returns over the prior 5 years. Engaged employees outperform disengaged employees by 20 to 28%. What kind of impact would that have for your organization? Highly engaged employees have less absent days, an average of 3.5 days a year compared to those that are not engaged. A 5% increase in total employee engagement actually correlates to a 0.7% increase in operating margin. And then finally, one last statistic I'll share with you is that organizations with highly engaged employees actually achieve twice the annual net income of organizations whose employees tend to lag behind on engagement. So think about that for a second. we're seeing a trend here, right? So employees who are engaged blow organizational performance out of the water, statistically speaking. So we're doing the right thing by our employees, and we're getting this huge benefit on the other side, which is great for all of the reasons we can think of related to more income, more margin, more revenue. But how great is that for those employees as well? You're able to hire, you need more employees. You're able to have a little more flexibility in what you pay people. It just gives everybody, it's just such a win-win. We just love it. So how can leaders tell if employees are engaged or not? Let's start by thinking about this from a more practical, kind of observable standpoint. What do engaged or disengaged employees look like? So our engaged employees, the look of employee engagement, the actions that contribute positively to the work of the organization include things like employees who take action when they see a problem or opportunity. They adapt more quickly to challenging or crisis situations. They're going to work, the work group does not give up despite having challenges and difficulties. They tend to deal well with unpredictable or challenging situations. They look out, they're on the lookout for new or challenging situations. They're more flexible in expanding the scope of the work. So, hey, can you stay a little later today and let's push through and get this project done? Engaged employees are all about doing that. It doesn't even faze them to do those types of things. They tend to view unexpected responsibilities as an opportunity to learn something new, and they tend to volunteer for new projects. What about the disengaged employees, right? They act in the opposite manner. You can see by the look on the guy's face how this must feel, right? But may also engage in behaviors like they complain a lot, they make excuses, gossip, lack enthusiasm. They don't tend to be super helpful with other people. No questions. They don't really want to change or think about new things. Or maybe they're a know-it-all. Definitely not a team player, or generally not a team player. A little bit more irresponsible. They may lie. They don't really care about growth. They lack connection with the job. So a disengaged employee isn't necessarily going to have all of these characteristics or behaviors. And I would expect that you would see more than one or two. So think for a minute about what you're seeing in your organization, both on the positive and the not so positive side. One other thing to think about is look at statistics within your own organization like turnover or longevity. All right, so grab your notes and your action item page for just a minute. And think about your department or organization, whichever is most relevant to you, in light of the behaviors that we just discussed. And take a minute and rate your department or organization on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very engaged and 1 being very disengaged. So just take a minute to do that, and then right below that, take a second and list 2 or 3 observations that support your rating. So why did you give yourself a 1 or 5 or 2 or 4? What's that about? What are you seeing that's leading you to those conclusions? So I'm going to keep moving, whereas normally, and what I'd ask you to do is, if you've got a few observations that you're making and would be willing to share the rank you gave and an observation, I'd love it if you put it in the Q&A or the chat box for us, whichever would serve you better. And we'll take a peek as we go along. So we've talked about some observable behaviors that leaders can look for. Another way to obtain input about how engaged your people are is to conduct a satisfaction or engagement survey. These are surprisingly common, and they're surprisingly done poorly oftentimes. There's, I think, key elements that folks miss a lot of times when they're doing this. We're going to talk a little bit about those today. There's formal and informal approaches to doing this, and how you approach a survey really depends on what resonates best with your organization's culture. It also may have a bit to do with the size of the organization. The bigger, more formal, complex surveys that are more time-consuming can also cost more. So more time and money sometimes isn't always the best idea for a small organization. But we'll talk about some tools here in a few minutes that might serve a smaller organization a little easier. And regardless of how you approach the survey, what's most important is to be, first, there's 3 things. 1 is to understand or be very clear about how you will use the information before you send it out. It's all in the planning. What is it you're trying to understand about your workplace engagement? How will you use the information? What do you want the survey to tell you? And what are your goals? So having this clear ahead of time and collaborating with multiple key stakeholders can be really helpful to make sure you're crafting a survey that will truly serve you. Nothing's worse than sending out something and not getting back information that's valuable and useful once you've taken the time. Number 2 is to ensure employees feel safe providing feedback. Again, the way your culture is wired to communicate at some level will dictate what you know about this. Like if you work for your organization, you're going to have a sense of this within your own organization typically. But consider who's going to have access to the information received, how it will be used. Consider doing it, allowing people's responses to be anonymous, or if that's something that's important in your organization. Oftentimes in larger organizations, this can be a really big deal. And it can be a big deal in smaller companies as well, but be real clear on what you're going to do there and what you're going to let people, and communicate that to your employees. You want people to be real clear that they can be open and honest and direct with the communication they give you, and feel safe to do that. And then finally, and this is actually the biggest one that we see as a challenge, and that's following up on the information received. So your employees take the time to fill out the survey, they give you great valuable information, and they feel like they've really invested time in the process, and nobody hears anything about what we do with it, what we learn, what actions are we going to take. So I really encourage you, kind of both the administrators of the survey and the leaders of the organization, give yourself enough time to review the results. And, also prepare yourself to receive the feedback. Some of it's going to be really helpful and some of it won't be. When sharing the results, we really recommend focusing on the themes rather than specific situations. Because sometimes what you'll find, right, Betty is going to have a grudge with Joe and she's going to call something out real specifically that may be helpful information for a particular manager within a particular department to be on alert and to maybe even address. But it may not be how you want to share out the broad results of the survey. And so we really talk about, hey, gather the feedback in the themes rather than specific situations. I love one example of an HR manager that actually used to work for me at a company that had about 400 people. It was a food and beverage manufacturing company. About 2/3 of those folks were on the production side and the rest were corporate office staff. And one of the really brilliant things this HR manager did, I thought, to ensure we got the surveys returned, was to hand out, we created these swag bags, which had, it was an insulated bag and a logoed mug and some t-shirts. It was just this really cool bag that really had stuff in it. In fact, some of the stuff I still have. And she gave those to each of the managers, enough for all of their people. And what they would do is give the swag bag to the people that worked for them after they completed the survey. And so what was neat about it was it really increased kind of the positive energy around the survey and sent a message of appreciation to folks for completing it, which was super, super fun. So the two additional handouts I want to point out in your, that we put on the web chat today are less formal survey tools. One is something we call Start, Keep, Stop, so SKS. You may have heard of it. It's been out there a long time. It's super simple. And we love it because it's an evaluation tool that's simple. There's very limited training requirements, it's low cost, and actually it can be used in a variety of ways. So it can be used to solicit feedback from your leaders, your direct reports, or honestly, it can also be adjusted to just ask to inquire about the organization as a whole rather than individuals. You could ask questions about the individual or the organization. So lots of cool uses there. A lot of my smaller clients will tend to use it in their performance evaluation context as well. And then second, sort of what I call the canned employee engagement survey that just sort of gives you the questions in a box is this Gallup survey. It's been around for quite some time, but these questions are from the Gallup organization, and they are really great for a more structured engagement survey. And you could email these out potentially as a really simple way to do it, or you could build these questions into something like MailChimp or, oh gosh, there's a whole bunch of tools that are doing this right now, but there's SurveyMonkey is another one also. So just encourage you, this is one that might save you the time of building every question for yourself. But remember, your goal is to learn what's working and what's not so that you can do more of what is and adjust what's not. So finally, just a real quick comment regarding situations where you do have a one-off outlier or two, much like we talked about a minute ago, where you just got some feedback that's kind of a one-off. You may not need necessarily to do an intensive survey to uncover, maybe, or to address something is a one-off situation already that exists in your organization. What you might need to do here is just have a one-on-one conversation that simply says, hey, Joe, over the last few weeks, I've observed you doing X, Y, and Z. Gosh, I'm concerned about this, and I wanted to talk with you to see if there's something I can do to help. So what I'm doing there is I'm not putting Joe on the defensive. I'm observing a behavior, and I'm asking him, hey, how can I help you address this? So I'm partnering with Joe to do that. So that's, it may not need a whole survey. You might just need to address a one-off issue, and that might be one way to do it. So while I still think that surveys can be super useful, they do take time to administer. So in our work, we've done a fair amount of work with companies in this area, and we've over the years gathered a fair amount of survey data and compiled it into themes that I hope will give you insights that you can use right away. And so if you look here for a second, you'll see the big picture causes that we've gathered that are the big picture causes for disengagement. And we can see that they include this list to the right of the slide that you see there. Now, before I walk through these, I want to point something out about this list, and that is that they actually increase in importance. So from top to bottom, starting with compensation and benefits and ending with difficulties with management, comp and benefits is actually the least the smallest issue relative to difficulties with management, which is by far the largest of the list. So compensation and benefits, this can always be a factor, but non-financial factors consistently play an important role for employees in engagement. So as we said earlier, right, a highly engaged employee, the compensation is not as big a deal as you think it is if they're highly engaged. So employees who don't see how their work connects to the big picture of the organization, this can be especially prominent or a challenge for companies that are growing rapidly. Number 3 is no opportunities for growth or development in their current position. Next is inadequate resources. Employees feel like, gosh, they're not getting the training, they can't get what is needed to get their job done, and they kind of check out, they get frustrated. Next is lack of workplace flexibility. Our work lives change to accommodate a 24/7 work lifestyle, yet many companies are still really rigid in their ability to let employees, address personal commitments. This is especially important to the younger generation that we're seeing. And while we are seeing a shift in this 24/7 mentality, it's certainly still alive and well in some key areas of the country. The Bay Area is we see this a lot. We see this in LA, we see it in New York, so a lot of bigger cities. And high-tech companies, we see this a lot still, that 24/7 mentality. And so we're expecting employees to be here all the time, and yet give them no flexibility for addressing some of the personal needs that they have. And then last but not least, right, this is the biggest one on the list, is difficulties with management. This could be senior management, lack of feeling respect from a direct manager, your own manager maybe is disrespectful or unkind, or is not dealing with issues that are going on in the department with other employees. It could be argued that the majority of reasons an employee is disengaged are in some way connected to a conflict or difference in opinion with management. Actually, in fact, a statistic that is interesting to me is that in a recent study by Custom Insight, they actually did some additional analysis on employees that were the most disengaged, and 49% of these employees, their disengagement had to do with their relationship with their immediate manager. So it's pretty powerful as we look at this list to see the impact on these areas on disengagement and how impactful they really are. At the end of the day, what we see is that employees really just want, whoops, pardon me guys, I jumped forward a little too fast. There we go. At the end of the day, these big picture items really just point to kind of not only what causes disengagement, but what do employees really want? And what they want is to feel valued, right? This is a human need, whether you're at work or at play in your personal life. So let's expand a little bit on this idea of feeling valued. We define valued, or feeling valued, is defined as the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. So how do we treat people that we value? We show them respect. We act in ways that create trust. We demonstrate appreciation for them. We have their best interests at heart, and we are invested in helping them grow. People want to feel like they're contributing, like they're useful, like they're making a difference, having an impact, like they are a real person and not someone that's just there to do a job. They want to be rewarded for their work, recognized when they have contributed. They want to be challenged and developed, not just feeling like they're stuck in kind of a dead-end job. So again, some of these things we talked about earlier that cause disengagement, the opposite creates not only engagement, but helps them to feel valued. And we talked about, so I want to share a little bit more about with you a few things that positively impact employee engagement. So we talked about the things that cause disengagement, but talking about some things that really do impact engagement. So a recent survey by the Society for Human Resources Management on employee job satisfaction and engagement, actually respectful treatment of all employees at all levels was ranked as the most important factor contributing to job satisfaction. So when I treat you with respect and you treat me with respect, I just naturally feel better about being more satisfied in my work. If I go back to the survey by Custom Insights that I talked about a few minutes ago, the top 10 drivers for employee engagement included respect, everyone being treated fairly, trust, values, teamwork, and cooperation. So you might be sitting there and saying, God, this lady lives in a dream world, right? I have work to do. I don't have time for all of this. How do I make people feel valued and engaged? And let me just say that I get it. I really do. You're busy. You've got orders to fill. You've got customers to satisfy. You don't have time to spend a lot of time trying to cater to every single person's desire and wants. And I really, really understand that. But, valuing people doesn't have to mean employees are always getting what they want. It doesn't mean people can't get their work done. You may have to stop a few minutes here and there and answer questions or address issues, but really this becomes a way to behave and engage within an organization that over time becomes part of your DNA. So we encourage kind of a crawl, walk, run approach to adding some of these behaviors to your organization, and many of them I'm sure you already have, that increase an employee's feeling valued and therefore increasing their engagement. And truly, the benefits always outweigh the costs. We've just never seen the opposite to be true. What I would challenge you to think about a little bit in your own organization are the behaviors you're observing. Just take a look around, spend the next week, and be really intentional about looking around and seeing where are you finding engaging behaviors, where are you seeing disengaging behaviors. Literally, I would look at that slide we talked about early on with the happy lady and the sad guy, and just ask yourself, where am I seeing these different behaviors? And I think what you'll generally find is you have probably more of the engagement and less of the disengagement, which is probably a great thing. And then pick out a couple of the disengaging, and really you probably have one or two that are kind of permeating your culture or showing up more often than not. And you can get on top of those rather than feeling like you've got all this stuff you got to deal with or all these issues that maybe you don't have. You probably just have a couple of them or one or two. Whatever your situation is today, though, if you choose to start from a perspective of valuing your employees, it's just something you can build on and that people will be drawn to. Your retention rates will go up. Your employee brand will get the word about your employee brand and how you treat your folks will get out on the street. It gets around, right? So now as you're growing and you need more people, and you need more people that are a good fit for your organization, you're going to start to naturally draw those folks to you that resonate with your core values. But again, the word gets out when you are treating employees or your own employees as valued members of your team. So let's talk a little bit about how to identify engagement opportunities. If we're striving to have engaged employees, it requires that we create a culture of trust and respect. Like, where do we start and how do we do this? You know, where people are valued and there's good communication. The vehicle for getting this done is really on the shoulders of our leaders, right? Remember my earlier comment about the causes of disengagement? One of the leading causes was problems with management. Not only that, but they, both, you know, senior, middle, and line leaders are the ones that have the opportunity for the most influence on the day-to-day lives of our people. So it would make sense that we would put them in the driver's seat of the vehicle helping us to get to that place of engagement. In order to do that, though, they really need some things from us as well. Managers need to be trained, competent, and confident. You know, it's easy to promote. In fact, we see this a lot in the small and mid-sized companies that we work with, that, you know, the best technical person is oftentimes promoted. And, you know, at what point, you have to ask yourself, at what point were they ever trained in these areas of management and leadership? And so that's something that we have to be really aware of, is where do we need to provide that support and mentorship to our leaders who may not already show up that way. Managers need support from upper management and others like HR, mentorship, maybe, you know, particularly when it comes to handling issues. Again, that's not something that always comes naturally to folks, and so ensuring that you're helping your managers make good decisions and supporting those decisions is really key. And then lastly, holding managers accountable is important. It's important to set the expectations for what you need from them in the role and to communicate this to them. You've provided the support, you're providing the mentorship, but what is it you really are asking them to do? And once you've provided this with them, really give them the support that they need and help them to address the areas where maybe they're not doing their part or coming up short. You know, at the end of the day, everyone in the organization, from the leadership team down to the lowest level of the organization, and everyone in between, is responsible for employee engagement. So, but as leaders and managers, we're particularly accountable for creating an environment where engagement is possible and really can thrive. So I'm going to kind of take the second half of our time here, or I should say maybe the last 20 minutes of our time, and talk through 6 specific things that you can do to create a culture of trust, respect, communication within your organization, the things that really lead to engagement. And to make it simple and to help us remember it, at least this helps me, is we're going to use the acronym VALUED, V-A-L-U-E-D. So if you would, grab your notes and action item sheet, and as we go through each leveler, I would, and discuss the opportunities to engage your people, I really encourage you to consider where your organization's strengths and weaknesses are. Again, I'm guessing you have way more strengths than weaknesses, and where those weaknesses exist, you're going to be able to highlight the kind of 1 or 2 areas where you're like, that's the big one for us, and focus there. The first one is to visualize the strategic goals. People want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and oftentimes there's a lack of clarity around the organization's mission, vision, values, and or strategic plan, and beyond that, what is their specific role? There just isn't, you know, the leadership team sometimes will devise these pieces of the organization's identity, and sometimes not do the greatest job at sharing it out more broadly than the leadership team or the management team below them. This is something that was really helpful. Employees feel valued when they really understand what are they there to do and how are we going to do it, and what are our values, and do I align with those, and how do those feel to me? What's the strategic plan? Are we trying to grow 20% next year, and how are we going to do that? What's my part in helping to do that? Next, it can be really demotivating to constantly be bumping up against issues in the workplace that need to be addressed. Think back to a time, for example, when you worked in a department and there was an issue that maybe your manager didn't address. I imagine it was super frustrating, and these things tend to fester over time. There was one department that I worked with where the manager always wanted to avoid conflict, and actually she had a couple of bullies on her team, and she was having the hardest time addressing the issues. And then other people within the department tried to address the issues by standing up to these guys, and it really created a big mess. Her lack of leadership significantly affected the department, and it resulted in a lot of wasted time and stress, not to mention the impact on productivity for everybody. So the manager is the one who can address it, and they need to. It doesn't mean you need to be a dictator. You just need to address issues when they come up. It's just the challenge is it's not in everybody's wheelhouse to do this, right? We tend to naturally avoid conflict, and these skills aren't necessarily things we naturally show up with, or maybe we were even trained to do in some of our early employment training. Smaller companies also don't always have the internal resources to provide this assistance. And if this is the case, consider outside external resources who can help. Going back to the outlier individual situation I mentioned earlier, she may be acting disengaged because you're addressing these issues and they don't like it. So this is something to be aware of. You may need to address the issues with him or her so the rest of the department just isn't so impacted, and they may not like it. So we visualize, we address the issues. Next is to listen. You don't have to do everything the employee says, but do listen. Listen to how their work is going. Do they need help or resources? Listen to how things could be improved from their perspective. Listen to their concerns. Listen to understand what motivates or demotivates them on an individual level. Listen to find out how they want to grow, to the stressors in their personal life. Be a little bit careful here, as this can kind of be, you can tread into areas that I would caution you about sometimes. And I would say, again, if we're talking about our whole people coming to work, there's an element here that matters, and it can be really beneficial to listen. Think about how you feel when you have been listened to, and also feel heard, what that does for your own, how you feel valued by that person. One of the things I encourage in this listening context is you might have a few open-ended questions at the ready. Phrases like, tell me more about that. What about that was important to you? Again, trying to get to that thing under the thing, as I always call it. What's the thing under the hood that they're really trying to say? Because sometimes it's not the first statement, but it's the second or third. And another phrase is, and what else? So what's important to you about that? They tell you one or two more things. Maybe you say, and what else? I encourage you also to be available to listen, both in time and present. This is a big problem these days, right? With everybody has 3 devices and a laptop, and they're on the go, and everybody's busy. Be intentional about this. When you do have a situation where you get to listen to someone that you work with, upstream, downstream, lateral, doesn't matter. Schedule a time and really be present. Next is people want to understand. They want to know how they're doing. They want to receive feedback. Interestingly enough, a trend that started a few years ago and continues with gusto today is the increase in frequency with which people desire feedback. No longer, remember in the old days, so to speak, and this was not that long ago, performance reviews or feedback, as we called it, was given once per year and considered adequate. Particularly with the younger generation, we're seeing that more immediate feedback is way more preferred, and in fact, it's expected by many folks now. In response, companies are tending to move away from the annual performance appraisal and creating situations and making time for shorter conversations with employees at much shorter intervals throughout the year. This is a different kind of training. Think, the performance appraisal that we used to see years ago was a whole lot of, the boss telling the employee, this is working, this isn't working, and sometimes was kind of harsh at times. But pretty kind of robotic and usually filled with lots of stress by both folks, versus think about how a conversation might feel. Both parties are listening, both parties feel understood, etc. So it has a different feel to it. And the benefit of giving feedback more frequently, frankly, is that just by knowing the areas that need to change, you can avoid smaller issues becoming larger ones down the road. Finally, don't forget how important it is to let people know when they're doing well. You can tell them verbally, you can write them a thank you note or give them a phone call. I call it the doing something right phone call. In fact, I schedule these. It's something that I do I schedule these on my calendar once a week. And I will pick up the phone, and then this is with employees, this is with our business partners, with our customers, and I just I call up and really try and, in the employee context, just, hey, I really appreciated this thing you did last week. It really had an impact in this way. Sometimes that's the language that I will use, and I find that, frankly, it feels great, and I think that feedback is just really goes a long way to making our employees feel really valued. We really went for the gusto here with the letter E, with equip and empower. So when we talk about equip, really what we're talking about here is, setting your employees up for success. This includes things like explaining the job and what's involved, providing them with the training that they need to do their job, letting them know what's expected of them, providing them with the resources they need, things like the computer, the phone, access to, the materials they need, both online and in hard copy form. By equipping employees with what they need, you then empower them to do the job better than they could otherwise. They feel enabled to make decisions within the scope of their job and to solve problems. Empowerment instills trust. Also, if employees feel empowered, this also benefits you because it allows you to delegate more and not have to spend as much time on the technical aspects of the job or department, and instead you can focus on more strategic and management-oriented functions. Next we have discuss. Discuss what's going on. We're really focused here on communication, and in fact, if you look at many of these areas we've talked about along the valued acronym, they're very communication-oriented. And so I think we're seeing a theme here where communication is something that, as you look at it in your organization, ask yourself, where are we hitting this out of the park and doing this well? And where is communication a stumbling block for us? I usually find in the organizations that we work with, there's pockets where it's really effective and pockets where it's not. I really encourage you to take a look at that. It's just so important to discuss what's going on in the organization. When people feel informed, when people feel like they know what's going on, regardless of how you show up, what your own kind of personality type is. Do you come from a place of fear or abundance, scarcity? How do you think? When you have information, it allows you to really have more confidence and to not focus on what you might not know or to make things up because of a lack of information, which is often a common result of not discussing what's going on, is people tend to make things up. So discussion also implies a two-way communication path. There's an opportunity for open communication and for people to ask questions, even when you can't give them all of the answers. So one statistic regarding open communication is that only 26% of employees feel like my employer listens and responds well to me. So if you can capitalize on open communication, it can be a big winner for your organization. Ways to discuss what's going on. Every company has kind of their communication method or style or the thing that resonates most effectively for the organization. And some ideas that are common, right? All staff or department meetings, roundtable meetings. Sometimes managers will do impromptu meetings to fill us in on items that management are talking about in leadership team meetings. One organization that I worked for, there was a situation with layoffs, or we were facing layoffs, and we would have short 10 to 15 minute meetings where the division head would just give us an update on anything new and would also answer questions. And you know what? He didn't always have the answers to our questions, which can be particularly tough in this type of situation. But he was really committed to getting answers where he could and did the very best he could do. And I think the amount of trust that he instilled in us and the folks in the organization was really important, and certainly made us feel valued, even in the context of what was eventually going to be bad news for many folks in the organization. Okay, as we get close to wrapping up for today, and actually I'm a little farther ahead of schedule than I expected to be, which is good news. Grab your notes and action item page again. Now, take a minute. We went through the 6 valued engagement opportunities. I'm going to show them to you again. But what we're going to do in our page is to think of the 6 valued engagement actions and your organization's competency in each area. Rate your organization's competencies on a scale of 1 to 5 in each of these areas. You may also want to add a few comments and specific actions you might think about taking going forward. But for now, at the very least, rank each of these from 1 to 5. And then finally, look at your notes from the first and second exercise and take a minute and ask yourself, what are 3 action items for follow-up in my organization or department? Is it to have a conversation with the outlier you thought of earlier, or to do a formal or informal engagement survey? Maybe it's to talk to management about what you learned today. You know, are there other managers in your organization that would benefit from some of this material? Go back and have a roundtable session where you can discuss it and maybe brainstorm additional ideas. So in summary, and some final tips for success, when we're talking about employee engagement, boy, it's really important because it impacts an organization's ability to relate and retain their employees. Retention, as we know, when the national unemployment rate is well below 4% right now, employees have lots of choices about where they go to work. And the cost to onboarding new employees and training those new employees and immersing those new employees in our organizations is extremely time consuming and costly. Nothing's worse than getting a great employee and finding that they're not being engaged and they go somewhere else, which is absolutely what's going to happen in a market where we've got unemployment rates the way we do right now. People have a lot of choices about where they work, and they're looking for engagement. They're looking to feel valued. So employee engagement impacts the organization's overall performance. Over and over we see this. And then finally, engagement really can be improved by showing employees that they are valued. So I encourage you to kind of keep that valued acronym handy and just kind of, once a month or at some regular interval, taking a look at that and asking yourself, how are we doing here? Are we doing this well in my department? Are we doing this well as an organization? Some additional resources I'd just like you to make you aware of. These are some that we use in our practice. There's lots more out there. Shoot, I probably could have created 3 pages here now that I'm thinking about it again. But some of these books here, Crucial Conversations has been around a long, long time. And it's just a really great kind of comprehensive, very approachable methodology. There's a book. There's a whole training curriculum if you really go for it. That I think gives some really great communications training for people in organizations at every level. So hopefully at this point, or a few minutes from now, you'll have a set of actionable items to go back to your organization with and really start to look at, how do I keep my great employees engaged so that we have long-term relationships with them? We want them to feel valued. We want them engaged. And it's just such a win-win for everyone in our organization, and accelerates performance in a way that the opposite just cannot do. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to be with you. If you have follow-up questions, concerns, any comments, feel free to give me a call anytime. I'd be happy to have a private conversation with you if you have some specific issues you're trying to address. And then if you can, in November, we're going to have the 3rd in this series on retention and how do we retain great employees? What are some things we can do there? So relate and retain are very much connected, and we would love to see you at that as well. And Lori, I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you, Erin. There was a few comments made in the question box right away when you asked the type of companies and number of employees. So yeah, I did want to share that Karen shared MBI Energy Services project management, more than 25, looking for employee retention. And then Michelle had listed too, accounting manager, greater than 25 employees, interested in current trends in business management, succession planning. So,
thank you both for sharing. I'd be curious if there, while we've got just a couple of minutes, would anybody be willing to share any of their action items that they came up with coming out of today? I'd be curious.
Sure. So if you'd raise your hand, those that want to share, I'll unmute you. Do we have any brave souls here?
Right. And if not, that's okay. It'd be fun to kind of hear what people took away from today a little bit.
Absolutely. No one's raising their hand right now. So if you think
all right, no worries. No worries.
And Erin, do you have a contact slide at the end here you'd like to pull up for us?
I do. I think, here we go, right here.
Yeah, great.
Right there. So yeah, again, comments, questions, feel free to give me a jingle. Email or phone is fine.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. As Erin shared, look for the next one that will be in November. And Erin, what was the topic on that again? Was it retention? No.
Yes, it's on employee retention, which has a lot of similar themes, but has a lot of different material to the one we did today.
Okay, well, I'm interested in that as well. And so for those of you, jump out there, get registered for that. We do already have that one posted, and we will end today's session. Erin, thank you so much for delivering part 2. We all look forward to part 3.
Sounds great. Thanks, Lori. Have a great day.
You bet. Hope to see you all on another webinar real soon. Bye for now.